found in these Cambrian type of rocks. Now, as we've already talked, any theory should be the best explanation of the facts. And the theory of evolution talks about gradual change. So as we look for fossils in these type of rocks, we should expect to see many examples of fossils which are part way between the species and creatures that we can see today. But what are actually the facts from the fossil record? If we actually look at the fossil record, what we actually see are well-defined species. We don't find intermediary fossils part way between groups or species. Now, one example of an intermediary fossil that is often mentioned is Archaeopteryx, and I'd just like to think a little bit about that. The Archaeopteryx fossil shows that the animal had bird's feathers, and yet it also had the toothed jaw of a reptile. And because of that, people have suggested that it is transitional or intermediary. However, the reality of this fossil is that all of its features are fully formed. We don't see a feather in formation, we see a fully formed feather, just like birds' feathers today. And in fact, as we look at the fossil generally, we actually see that it is fully ready for flight. It had the brain case similar to a modern bird. So from the facts, everything had progressed to make this a fully formed bird. And it's very much like the duck-billed platypus that we can observe alive today in Australia. The duck-billed platypus has the beak of a duck, and again, it's not a half-formed beak, it's a fully formed beak. The duck-billed platypus has the fur like a mammal. It's not half-formed fur, it's fully mammalian fur. And this is the reality. These are the facts of the fossil record and of species today. We don't observe transitionary or intermediary species. Darwin, in his classic Origin of the Species, acknowledged this lack of transitional animals. This is what he wrote: "As by this theory, innumerable transitional forms must have existed, why do we not find them embedded in the crust of the earth? Why is all nature not in confusion, instead of being, as we see them, well-defined species? The explanation lies, however, in the extreme imperfection of the geological record." Darwin was honest enough to admit these missing links, but he confidently expected that they would be filled in time. Have they? When 140 years later, in 1999, Professor Steve Jones of the University College in London published an updated Origin of Species, the fossil record still had the same problem. This is what he wrote: "The fossil record, in defiance of Darwin's whole idea of gradual change, often makes great leaps from one form to the next. Far from the display of intermediates to be expected from slow advance through natural selection, many species appear without warning, persist in fixed form, and disappear, leaving no descendants. Geology assuredly does not reveal any finely graduated organic chain, and this is the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against the theory of evolution." Fossils discovered in rocks like these give us an impressive fact, which is that the fossil record does not contain the partly developed animals that the theory of evolution predicts. This part of the quarry is actually internationally famous. Up here on my left, we can see grey rocks of the Cambrian era. But across here, to my right, we can see these pink rocks which are of the pre-Cambrian era, and geologists believe that these predate the more recent Cambrian rocks up here. And so far we've been talking about fossils which have been found in these Cambrian type of rocks, where we find many fossils, as we have said. Strangely, very few fossils are found in these pink type rocks over here on my right. Most major groups of animals and plants and species which are seen in the fossil record appear fully formed in these grey Cambrian type rocks. And this is how Richard Dawkins, who's an ardent supporter of the theory of evolution, describes it. The Cambrian strata of rocks, vintage about 600 million years, are the oldest ones in which we find most of the invertebrate groups. And we find many of them already in an advanced state of evolution the very first time they appear. It is as though they were just planted there, without any evolutionary history. So we see one of the prime supporters of the theory of evolution acknowledging the fact that in these grey type of rocks, all of the fossils appear without any history of them in these pink type of rocks. Now, the type of fossils found in the grey rocks typically are examples like trilobites, and how these creatures appear is actually a mystery to the theory of evolution, because according to that theory, animals develop slowly, and their sudden appearance here doesn't fit the theory of evolution. Now, some have suggested that the ancestors of these Cambrian type fossils were soft-bodied, and that therefore they didn't form fossils, so that we wouldn't expect to find them in the fossil record. However, recently fossils of soft-bodied creatures have been found in these pink type of Precambrian rocks, and here is an example of one which was discovered early in South Australia. Since then, many more soft-bodied plants and animals have been found fossilised in rocks like these, the pink ones. But there is a problem because they are not transitional species. The fossils found in the pink type of rocks do not lead on to the fossils found in the grey type of rocks. Ancestors of the Cambrian fossils are not found in the fossil record. So again, the facts of the fossil record don't support the theory of evolution. Before finishing our look at the theory of evolution, I'd like to take a look at a couple of other facts that are often used to support this theory. And one of the most important is the comparative studies of modern plants, animals and insects and so forth, a branch of science which is known as cladistics. It's obvious that when you look at certain animals, some look like each other, and what humans have done is they've produced a classification system placing things that look alike in the same group. Monkeys and humans are similar. We both have arms, we both have legs, we both have 10 fingers and thumbs. Or by contrast, horses, donkeys and zebras are similar. They all have 4 legs. They all have a single hoof. They all have a certain design of face or snout. And this has led men to classify animals together. However, we can't do any experiments. We don't know how these observable facts came to be. And the theory of evolution is only one possible explanation. An equally valid explanation is that an intelligent designer created them like that. Both are equally valid explanations. Another argument used to support the theory of evolution is variation within species. Look at dogs, the argument goes. Look at all of the different breeds that humans on a relatively short time scale have been able to produce. And the argument continues that, given enough time, this variation could produce new creatures. Now, the simple fact is that this has never been observed. Equally, the scale of change needed is vastly different from that which has actually been observed. It's one thing to see finches with different beaks, as Darwin did. It's a huge jump. And indeed, it's unscientific to say that the same mechanism can explain the appearance of a heart, could explain the appearance of bone or of feathers, or even warm-blooded creatures like you and I. Significant variations have never been observed, and I re-emphasise it is not good scientific practice to extend known information far beyond what has been seen. It's not scientific, and in fact you cannot use the very minor, the tiny changes in variation within species as evidence to support the huge changes required by evolution. So let's just summarise then what we've seen in our visits to Jodrell Bank and also the Urkel Nature Reserve. Firstly, the Big Bang Theory. This is actually based on only a few facts and can't actually be proved. Scientists are doing their best, but with a very limited amount of information, and it's important therefore to accept that we may be missing some important information. However, the few facts that we do have support the theory that the universe started with a Big Bang, provided finally we are prepared to accept some assumptions that we also can't actually prove. Secondly, the theory of evolution. The simple truth is that the facts of the fossil record don't support the theory of evolution, because animals appear fully formed as distinct, different creatures in the fossil record, and there are no transitional forms. Equally, comparing animals that we see around us today gives no information as to how these animals actually came into existence. And finally, the small changes and variations that have been seen between species are tiny and are insufficient evidence to actually support the large variations required by the theory of evolution. Now that we've looked at the facts behind the Big Bang Theory and the theory of evolution, Patrick will now take you on the next stage of our investigation into the Bible and science.
Thank you, John. Let me introduce Paul Tavel. Paul is going to look at what the Bible says about the start of things, and then we will see if there is a conflict between the observable facts that John has been talking about and what Paul tells us.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm here in a bookshop in Birmingham, which specialises in Bibles. John's been looking at the observable facts in science. Now we want to see what the equivalent is for the Bible. If we think about it, we'll see that it's the text of these Bibles that we can think of as being the observable facts. Now we look carefully at the observable facts in science, so we must be sure to look equally carefully at the observable facts in the Bible. So let's look at one of these Bibles now and see what it has to say about the start of things. Let's look at the first few words of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Leaving aside for the moment the argument about whether or not a creator was involved, this sentence tells us that the universe, including our earth, came into existence at some point called the beginning. The Bible then goes on to say, "Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep." We're now told that at one stage our earth was covered with water, uninhabited and dark. Opinions vary among Bible students over what the text is saying about the beginning of the universe and our earth and how long it all took. Some Bible students think that there could be a time gap between the words, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth," and "Now the earth was formless and empty." So they think the Bible could be saying the universe was made some unspecified time before planet Earth came to be how it is now. Regardless of these differences of opinion about the details, we can see that the Bible text still tells us that planet Earth came into existence and was at one stage covered with water, totally uninhabited and dark. The first two chapters of the Bible then tell us that our world, as we know it today, came into being in 6 stages. The record seems to be of what someone on the earth would have seen as events unfolded. At each stage, God gives instructions, and the record then confirms that the instructions are carried out. The Bible tells us that at the first stage, the instruction from God is, "Let there be light." For the first time, light reaches the water that covers the earth. We're also told that God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. The water now experiences the vital cycle of day and night. The instructions for the second stage are, "Let there be an expanse between the waters to separate water from water." We can see what this means when we read, "God called the expanse sky." The water around the earth is separated to form clouds and sea. There is now a space for life, but with an abundant supply of water, which is vital to sustain life. At the third stage, the instructions are, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place,